Hi, everybody. This is Ian Lamont from Lee Media doing episode 3 of my 2022 Amazon Shallow Dive for Publishers. And today I'm going to be talking about Amazon detail pages. This is episode 3. Episode 2 was about Amazon search, and episode 1 was an introduction to this shallow dive. So, Amazon detail pages as of 2022, there have actually been some recent changes, maybe since the last time you checked into Amazon detail pages and how your product or your book or your publishing company is presented on Amazon, and it's important to go over them. So let's get started. So what I'm going to be talking about is Amazon detail page view optimization. And when I say detail page, I mean the product page. Detail page is the term that Amazon uses, and actually they also use the term detail page view, DPV, which means somebody looking at the product page to find out about the product before making a decision to buy it or adding it to cart. Optimization means making it better. And why this is important is all of these elements that I just circled on the page, you have control over them in some way. You can control them, you can change them to increase the chances that people will first of all find your book, and then also they'll complete the purchase once they've looked at the detail page. So I'm going to be talking about kind of the factors that go in there and how you can optimize your book for better sales. This is actually a book that it's not a book. It's a related product. It has an ISBN. It's called a cheat sheet. Importantly, all the information I'm talking about right here, most of it you can use on other platforms as well. And I do that myself on Shopify and the other places where I sell books. So it's also important to remember that it's not just about the browser version of Amazon, Amazon.com, and like Chrome or Firefox or Microsoft Edge or whatever. It's also the mobile detail page view. So nowadays, most people are using Amazon. They're actually using the Amazon app. They're not using the desktop browser version of the app. And the information that Amazon presents on a detail page in the mobile view is different than the information that's presented to people who are using the desktop app. I've circled a couple items here, which are the same as the desktop, but there's a few things missing. So what's missing? And let's just go back and take a quick look. This is the desktop version on the right. So what is kind of not available here? And the thing that's not available is actually the description. It's on the mobile view, but it's way, way down. And in fact, most people, or many people, they don't even get that far. The first thing you see is the title, then you see the star reviews, then you see the image that you have associated with the book, then you see information about the pricing and adding it to cart, whether or not it's Prime. You see some other book details. Only after that, that's like scrolling down 3 screens, only after that do you see the description. And actually, these days, you might see something else first, and that's the A+ content. A+ content is a new feature as of late 2021. In 2022, if you are publishing a book, you should really take advantage of A+ content, and I'll show you why in a moment. Okay, so A+ content. It's rich content about your books. It's not the same as a description, so it's not just text information and like a couple paragraphs and some bullets. You can do things like you can add images, headlines, comparison charts. It's open to KDP publishers now, and on the mobile version of Amazon, it appears before the description, and it's really detailed. I'm going to show you an example in a minute. I think it's more suited to nonfiction and series books, but actually you can use it for fiction titles as well, especially if you already have art assets. So this might be kind of leftover art from your book cover or from some other thing you were doing. Like it could even be something like the picture of an author. But you can also use stock photography, as I shall show you in a minute. How you get to A+ content if you're using KDP, you go to kdp.amazon.com, click on marketing, and then A+ content will be down there. Importantly, when you create A+ content, you can actually you can apply it to a bunch of books you have using the ASIN, that's the Amazon product identifier, or the ISBN that you have associated with that particular book. Okay. Here is an A+ example for one of the books that I publish. Actually, I should say I use the same A+ content on 3 of the books that we publish. And this, I've arranged this from left to right. So left is the topmost view. Then as you go to the right, you're going farther and farther down the page. And you can see there's a couple interesting things here. For one thing, I'm using 3D images of the book. That's normally not possible in a Amazon detail page for books. You can just use a cover, like a 2D cover image, but you can use 3D images here. I'm using a stock photograph. This is a lady holding up a cardboard sign that says help. I got that off of Deposit Photos. It's a licensed photo. I think I paid like a dollar maybe for it. And I just put that in there because I think it applies to the book that I'm making. You can also see on the third pane that I'm using images from the book itself. These are screenshots that are within the book showing how to do things like, make an animation in PowerPoint or create a chart in Excel. And then on the fourth pane there, you can't see it that well because actually it doesn't look so good on mobile, but there's a comparison chart. So I have like checks for different things that it covers. For instance, I covered the Google versions of many types of software, whether or not I covered the Microsoft mobile apps, etc. So I created a comparison chart there. Once I created the A+ content, then I applied it to actually 6 different editions of the book. So 3 books, but the Kindle and the paperback edition of the book published through KDP. So this is really a great program. I'm very happy that they made it available. And I really urge publishers, if you have books already on Amazon, take advantage of A+ content. This is like, it's allowing you to promote your book in much clearer and much more detailed ways, and to use tools such as images that can really help explain the book to prospective readers. Here's another term to learn. Earlier I was talking about a term like detail page view. Another term that comes up on Amazon, as well as other online platforms, is click-through rate, or CTR. And the idea is when your book or your series is presented on Amazon or any other platform, usually it's presented along with other books too. And people will choose to click on certain books more than other books based on factors that they see in the basic search listing. So for instance, for these 3 books that I have here, maybe for the top one, the click-through rate is 0.5%. Maybe for the second one, which is also a book that I published, it's 0.25%. And maybe for the one at the bottom, which I don't publish, but Amazon knows that it's 0.1%. And there's different reasons why books may have higher click-through rates versus lower click-through rates. It depends on the keyword that they're searching for. It depends on, maybe the people will be looking at the publishing date for each of the books. People will definitely be looking at the star ratings as just a basic thing, and that's why the book on the bottom, which has a star rating, 3 stars out of 5, it's lower than the other ones. Amazon knows all the click-through rates. You're less likely to know your click-through rates unless you're using Amazon advertising, and I'll get into that later on in my presentation. But this is a really important term to learn, because the higher your click-through rate, the better your book will, the bigger the chance your book will have of being seen by prospective buyers, and hopefully they'll end up buying it. And the rate that we use to discuss the when people come to your detail page, what percentage end up buying it, that's called the conversion rate. So the detail page view, it converts browsers to buyers. And an example is, if your book has 100 visits in 1 week and 5 people end up placing an order, that's a conversion rate of 5%. Amazon uses a different term in some of its technical reports. They use something like unit session percentage. Amazon advertising, though, I think these days they're using conversion rate. And then, another thing you can do with Amazon advertising, as I've said before, they give you access to this great data. You can download it into Google Sheets or Excel and create your own metrics that might suit your business. But one thing I like to do in these presentations is Dr. Amazon. Dr. Amazon, what seems to be the problem? So the problem is, in this particular example, there's low click-through rate on search or advertisements that are appearing on Amazon's mobile application. And in particular, let's take a look at the bottom one there. And it's a cozy mystery. So the search term is cozy romance, and these are the first 4 titles that show up on the mobile application. The one in the bottom there, it's called A Cozy Mystery Romance Set, The Adventures of Finn and Annie, Volume 1. It has a low click-through rate, and you may be thinking, well, what are they doing wrong that would cause that to happen? Like, why is that book getting fewer clicks than the books that are above it? And there could be all kinds of issues with it. Oftentimes it relates to the thumbnail, that is the small image of the cover that people use to kind of quickly evaluate the book. It could relate to something like the reviews. For instance, the one at the top, the sponsored Dark Witch and Creamy Bewitched by Chocolate Book 1, it has 1,914 reviews versus the one on the bottom, Finn and Annie Volume 1, which only has 9 reviews. Sometimes there's a mismatch between the search terms and the book that is shown. And a common thing that happens, that's happened to me sometimes, is I'll search for something and actually it will show kids' books in addition to adult books. And I think that could be an issue for this particular book. If you look at Finn and Annie, it looks like it's a cozy romance, but it looks like it's maybe meant for young adult or something like that. And then also just in general, the competing book looks better for some reason. It could be just the look of the cover. It could be the number of positive reviews. It could be the price. All kinds of things go into that. So that's one reason why sometimes CTR may be low on a particular book when it's compared with other books that are out there. All right, here's another Dr. Amazon question. Low conversion rate. So people come to your book page, but they don't buy it. What's going on here? So for conversion rate, if you have anything above 5%, that's really good. If you have less than 5%, yeah, it's something you can work on. If it's below 1%, you're doing something wrong. And something is just plainly not meeting expectations. This particular book actually does not sell that well. And looking at this particular title, what are some of the things that stand out that might make people hesitate? And I'm going to point them out for you. The first thing on the upper left there, it says book 2 of 2, Personal Finance for Beginners in 30 Minutes. So there's actually, this is part of a series, but it's not showing it doesn't show the first book first. And, people may want to see that one first. There might be something with the title about it. The title doesn't meet kind of the expectations that they have about the particular book. And importantly, there's no Kindle edition available. So if you come to this particular detail page and you want to buy an ebook, you're out of luck. And in fact, one thing I urge you to do is to take a look at your own listings just to make sure everything is showing up all right. And sometimes you can diagnose the problem right away. So all of these things are things that I may be able to take care of on my own, or I might have to reach out to Amazon support to help to have them help me fix it. In this particular case, this was actually a third-party seller who was selling the book. They entered it separately into Amazon's system without seeing if the title already existed. So Amazon created a new listing. And what I can do with this is I can go to Amazon and say, hey, this listing here, it should be pointing to actually this other listing that I created. I'm the publisher. And hopefully they'll merge that. There's a bunch of different ways to measure these rates. Amazon advertising is actually the best way to do this nowadays. If you have an Amazon Seller Central account, and I know some sellers of secondhand books do have Amazon Seller, have reports that can give you insights into click-through rates and conversion rates. So that's where to go with that. And then also, if you're using anything like Facebook ads or Google Analytics, these types of data will also be available to you there. So what goes into a detail page view that converts well? Let's take a look at this particular book. Similar cover as the last one that I just showed you, but this is actually a different book by a different author, Crowdfunding Basics in 30 Minutes by Michael J. Epstein. It's actually sold pretty consistently well over the past 5 or 6 years that it's been out there. So first thing to pay attention to is the image. The image needs to look professional. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but if you're doing a DIY job or you're just kind of buying some, stock photo off the internet and using a really simple graphics program to create a title over it, I think you're probably making a big mistake. And I'm going to say that with a caveat because I used to do that myself, and I'm going to show you an example of actually what the impact is of using a DIY versus a professionally designed cover. The other thing that's important is the title and the subtitle. Once upon a time in publishing, it was okay to write a book or release a book with a kind of a vague title. And this was in the days when people weren't using search engines. But nowadays, people are using search engines, and they will use keywords related to whatever you're talking about to find the book that they're looking for. And if your subtitle or your book title or your metadata doesn't include those keywords, they may never find it. So that's something to keep in mind when you're designing a title or subtitle. The price is important. It has to not only be competitive, it also should be prime. And that will be apparent in the buy box. Okay, information about the author as well as the ratings, that should be in a pretty good state. These are things that you can make sure that they're accurate. In the case of ratings and reviews, you can actually use services, legitimate services, to get more, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then things like the description. Nowadays, as I said earlier, on the mobile view, the description is less important. It's way, 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 way down on the page. A plus content is far more important. So those are the things that really matter. If it meets expectations, people are more likely to buy it. So just keep that in mind. And all of these things, you or your author has some degree of control over them. You can make changes to make the book perform better. In some cases, you can't change the title or subtitle. I think that's kind of locked in once you do it. But think about this. Think about these things before you hit the publish button, just so you get everything right. Okay. Don't do this if you're making a book title. The Spectral Key, Cozy Mystery Gift for Mom Kindle Bestseller. And what's going on here is something called keyword stuffing. And people are taking keywords that appear when you do a search for some book. Like if you search for romance novel, you'll see Kindle bestseller or something like that. And they're just sticking it into their subtitle. You're not supposed to do that. Amazon actually has rules about it. Don't do it, because if you do it and they find out, a couple things might happen. One is they might delist the book. That is, they'll just remove the book from indexing, so people will never be able to find it. The second thing they may do is they may actually remove the book from publishing, that is no longer published, or they may shut down your account or cause some problem for your account. So don't do that. There are very clear rules about metadata. You can't do things like mention books by other authors, say that it's best-selling, put free or something in there, anything that's not related to your book's content, although that's a bit harder for them to police. But you have to be really careful with that. You want to be informative, but you don't want to abuse the system. And if it's obvious, you can get in trouble. Also, I think, frankly, many readers, they don't like this either. Here's another thing that you shouldn't do: DIY covers. And I say that as someone who actually printed a DIY cover when I first got started. Dropbox in 30 Minutes. This is the first book in the series. And I just said, all right, I know how to use Photoshop, so I'll just create my own cover. And I quickly realized it actually wasn't that good a cover. It just looked amateur hour compared to everything else that was on Amazon. And so I took the money from the limited amount of sales that I had at the time and hired a professional cover designer. He's actually someone I knew from the magazine industry, and he came up with some mock-ups, and then I chose this one. So that was the new cover that I created a couple months after I started publishing. Making that simple change resulted in a 50% rise in daily sales, and I calculated it. I measured it. So that's why you should use a real cover, not something you do on your own. Here's an interesting situation. This is from Amazon Seller Central. It's not a book product, but it is a paper product. It's a type of stationery that I publish, and they're actually very similar products. But you can see that the conversion rate is different. One of them is 15%, the other one is 6%. And let's take a look and see if you can figure out which one is 6% and which one is 15%. Just take a look at everything. Look at the image, look at the price, look at the availability, look at the reviews, things like that. And I think pretty quickly you'll realize what's wrong here. The one on the left is actually, even though it's cheaper, has the lower conversion rate, whereas the one on the right has a fantastic conversion rate. And there's a couple reasons for that. One on the left, it has only 6 reviews, 4 stars, only a single black and white image, and there's no Prime availability. One on the right, Prime available, 4 images to look at, 18 reviews. This was a couple years ago, actually. Now it's I think about 200 reviews. So this is the one that was doing far, far better. Okay, let's talk about reviews for a little bit. People do look at them, even though there's a lot of questions now about whether or not they're legitimate or not. It impacts advertising costs, because if you have more positive reviews, people are more likely to, first of all, click on the ad and then complete the sale. So it has a material impact on that. If you don't have, the reviews aren't good, or there's some other problem with the reviews, like it's 3 stars instead of 4 stars, that can make people be more cautious. So your advertising campaigns won't be as effective. Why else are reviews important? Well, one reason is because they give you insights into what people think about your book. Isn't that useful? You can figure out if people have a problem with the cover, with the character, with some other aspect of it, and maybe that's something you can address. You can't make everybody happy, but sometimes there are things you can do. Sometimes there are things you can do to manage expectations better. So if people complain about something like, oh, I was expecting a cozy romance novel, but this is actually more like historical fiction. Well, if that's the case, then maybe you've misclassified the book, or maybe that's something that you should mention in your marketing. Um, Lots of ways to get legitimate reviews. I see so many people talking about like these flat out scams involving paid reviews or review clubs on Facebook or stuff like this. Don't do that. There's so many good ways to get reviews. And if your book is good, it'll perform well in the reviews. If your book is bad, then maybe you need to make some changes to it. And these are places to get good reviews. For one thing, you can use an ARC program, NetGalley. NetGalley is basically like an online review system. You upload a PDF or an ebook version of your book to NetGalley, and they'll distribute it to their list of people who love to read books. It includes readers, bloggers, librarians, people like that. So this is really a great way to get your book into the hands of reviewers, and they'll leave reviews. Some of the reviewers actually who leave reviews, they'll cross post it on Amazon as well. Then there are these kind of serious reviews: Kirkus Indie, Forward, Publishers Weekly, Goodreads giveaway. I don't do that anymore. Amazon Vine, I used to do that when it was still free, but the last time I checked, it was not free. And there used to be a program on Amazon called Early Reviewer Program. They got rid of that, I think, because they're trying to push Amazon Vine. But these are legitimate ways to ask for reviews, honest reviews. You don't have to monkey around with some bogus service or ask your mom and your sisters and your best friend from high school to leave a 5-star review. That's not the way to do it. Try to do it the right way. When you do ask for reviews from people, for instance, if you're distributing ARCs or you're following up with a NetGalley reader, you're not supposed to ask them for a 5-star review. You can't give them a gift card in return for a good review. These Facebook review clubs, they're driving me nuts because usually maybe about 25% of the time when I give this talk, someone will come up to me afterwards and say, hey, I belong to this great review club, and if I join it and then I give some 4 or 5-star reviews to other people's books, then they'll give me the same thing. And what do you think about that? And what I think about it is it's an abuse of the system. It's a way that you can get into big trouble if they figure it out, and it's just like it's ethically wrong. The other thing, which fortunately I've never encountered directly, is people sabotaging other people's book reviews, and it's kind of like a junior high school type of tactic. But don't get into stuff like that. This is a bad idea. Here's a review you never want to see. The first one is they never received the book, but they still gave it 3 stars. The second book is, for some reason, the paperback version is actually printed backwards. It's extremely hard to read. Now, if you got a review like this, what would be the first thing that you'd do? Assuming that it's a legitimate review. The first thing I would do is I'd order a copy of the book to see if the same thing happened. Because if it did, then you've got a bigger problem than one person giving a 1-star review. You're going to be having a lot of people giving 1-star reviews. And it's best to nip that problem in the bud before it takes off. Okay, that concludes this edition of the Amazon 2022 Shallow Dive for Publishers. I have one more segment on Amazon advertising. If you like this video, please take a moment to like it on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. This is Ian Lamont from Lean Media, signing off.